Ooh, there you go, my friend. No one can leave now. You have to stay for this one. Honestly, you cannot leave. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on. I'm excited to introduce Michael Whatley from Coca-Cola. He's going to be talking about enhancing learning through virtual reality. Michael, it's all yours.
Thank you. All right, good afternoon, everyone. How's everyone doing? Hope you're enjoying the conference. It's been fantastic. Lots of good stuff over in the exhibition hall if you want to take a look. Lots of good stuff to look at. So in today's session, we're going to talk about kind of our journey that we've gone through so far with virtual reality, some 3D models, talking about our roadmap, where we started, what problem we were trying to solve, and then talking through some of the steps that we've gone through so far and our plans going forward. So being Coca-Cola, I decided to put this in the frame of a 3-course meal. So the first meal is going to be the problem. What problem are we trying to solve? We're understanding and defining what that problem is, and then the solution is kind of the vision. So we want to think about the problem, think about where we want to be, and then build the journey. So we're going to be taking different steps to make that vision a reality. So we'll start with the problem. When I started at Coca-Cola in March of 2020, I'm sure you all remember that was a great time in the world to start a new job specifically. So I was in the office for a week and then everything shut down. So fortunately, with my team being mostly remote, it wasn't really a big deal. But for the learning that we deliver hands-on training for service technicians. So we support the service technicians that go out and install and repair dispensing equipment all around North America. So what we would do is we would ship training kits like this you see on the screen, along with an instructor, to our service provider locations for up to 6, sometimes 8 attendees. So as you can imagine, this gets very expensive, very time-consuming. As you can see on our metrics here, the average cost per class was about $2,000, and we only had about 4 people in the class. So when we would send people out, the service providers would fill our roster, but then as time came for the class, those technicians would be out on calls as opposed to being back in the classroom. So we had some challenges there that we wanted to fix. We also employed some contract trainers because we had a huge demand of training that service providers needed. So we would spend about a little over $500,000 every year to deliver this training across the country, and ended up with a backlog of over 30 weeks with respects to trainer capacity, as well as requests, equipment, things like that. So we had a lot of challenges in terms of resources, and timing was not really on our side. So with the silver lining that was COVID, we kind of pushed everything into a virtual mindset. So we wanted to take this same experience that we had in person and really focus on how we could deliver the same content or similar content in a virtual fashion. Enter virtual learning. So what we have here is we have a studio in our Atlanta office that has green screen technology. We've got multiple cameras, a whole bunch of lights. We started with a small little room, and we've made many improvements, a lot of investment over the past couple of years. But what we wanted to really showcase was we wanted to take the in-person training that we did in the field and really focus on how do we transition that to an online platform. So that's kind of our first step in the process. So as you can see here, Mr. Bird is our instructor, kind of walking through an electrical schematic in front of a green screen, weatherman style. But what we do in these classes is we really focus on situations, scenarios that technicians are going to face in the field. We'll present them with problems. Say you go to a McDonald's and the Coca-Cola is not pouring like it should. So how do you diagnose what's going on? How do you understand the systems involved? How do you understand the components? And then ultimately, how do you diagnose and repair the situation? So we really bring in those types of conversations. We tend to present content in terms of flow paths. So if you think about a fountain system, you've got water, electricity, product, and CO2. Those are the main ingredients to make any kind of Coca-Cola beverage. So when you think about putting all those together into a fountain system, there are key components that go along the flow path. So as you think about how the system is working and you understand which components are involved in delivering the beverage, as you go down each flow path, you can start to diagnose and troubleshoot the various components. So those are the types of situations that we presented in these virtual classes. What we found from this, though, was Sometimes the service providers didn't have the right equipment to participate fully in class. So they might be in a conference room, so not everybody has a microphone, not everybody's speaking. Try to encourage people to use chat. We do in-class engagement techniques like Mentimeter, Poll Everywhere, things like that, to really bring in some of that engagement. And over the years, we've seen more and more participation from our technicians. So that was where we were. And we decided a lot of the big pushback that we got from our virtual learning was the lack of hands-on. As you can imagine, the technicians that we train, they are screw turners and button pushers. So they like that hands-on, they like that kinesthetic learning. So they're really going to put their hands on the equipment, make the repairs, swap the parts, and that's what they enjoyed. So that was the big pushback that we had from virtual. So we started thinking, how can we build an environment that really mimics that in-person experience, and how do we do it in a virtual way? So here's the solution. We decided to kind of roll this out in 4 phases, building on the virtual experience that we have so far. We really wanted to focus on kind of a crawl, walk, run, sprint. So the sprint is well into the future. But what we wanted to do first was start looking at how do we incorporate 3D models, virtual reality experiences into our virtual classes to enhance the content that we're delivering. Do it in a way that we can really provide visibility inside the dispensers. So if you open up a freestyle dispenser, one of those 100-drink machines, there's lots of tubing, hoses, wires, so it's difficult to see inside, even in an in-person classroom. But what we can do with our 3D models and our virtual reality experiences is take away all the noise. So you can really see the components, see where they're located, see how they're connected, and it's something that really enhances that virtual experience. It helps with the identification, like I said, and also simple troubleshooting. So beyond that, when we think about that hands-on component, we're going to develop simulated tasks based on dispenser platforms. So going back to that freestyle example, whether you're changing a flow control module, whether you're changing a pump or something like that, whatever it might be, there are task-based experiences that we can build in a virtual space that allow technicians to practice in a safe space, so they're not practicing on a customer's dispenser, but it's giving them a chance to experience what it would actually be like. And then for us, we can see the scores around speed, accuracy, and eventually a financial component that we'll talk about. So beyond that, we still have the opportunity to ship people and equipment around the country and focus more on that hands-on troubleshooting. But to alleviate that, we want to be able to build a virtual space. So an environment where, think about if you had a freestyle dispenser sitting right next to me. I'm leading this class. We're talking about this freestyle dispenser. You all are my students, and we're going to talk about how to fix one. So now, instead of having just this one dispenser that everybody works on in an in-person session, let's have 6 dispensers lined up, and all of you get a chance to work on your own individual dispenser. So you have a social learning component that really focuses on bringing people together. You've got people coming from all over the country. They've got different experiences, different knowledge set that they can actually apply to the situation. And so technicians can learn not only from the instructor, but also from other technicians. Finally, what we wanted to be able to do was gamify that virtual experience by creating more of a service technician simulation, so more of a gamified experience, really focusing on not only the technical aspect, but the other part of the job that tends to get ignored, which is the customer service side. So when you think about an experience with any kind of service technician, if you have a plumbing issue, HVAC issue coming into your house, you've got somebody that's going to come in, you don't know who they are exactly, so they're going to need to make you feel comfortable. Same thing happens for technicians when they go into restaurants. Maybe they've seen them before, maybe they haven't, but there's a job that technicians have to do to create more of a receptive environment for the customer itself. So the manager may come up, it's lunch rush, Coca-Cola machine's not working. That's not great. So they're going to be frustrated, they're going to be angry. So they're going to come to the technician and say, look, I need you to fix this as quickly as possible, but you also got to stay out of the way because we're busy. We need you to confine yourself to this little box and fix whatever you're fixing. Not great for the technician, but they do what they have to do. So those experiences that they're going to face in the field, we need to prepare them for. So when we build these simulations, we look to include a lot of that soft skill stuff that tends to get left out of these experiences. So the walk, run, sprint piece we are still working on. We've done very well with the crawl part, so we'll talk through some of that now. So here's the journey that we've been on. I'm going to break it down into 6 categories, starting with kind of socializing the strategy, testing prototypes, research, IT teams. I feel like that's been a theme throughout today's, making sure IT is involved. They are important partners. So we'll go through each one of these. So when it comes to socializing the strategy, this is where you get the money to invest in things. You got to be able to paint the picture or tell a story, depending on who your audience is. Some people like the visual. They want to be able to know what it's going to look like, how people are going to interact with it, but ultimately, what's the impact? Same thing on the story side. You want to tell people how you're going to implement it, what are you going to build, but what's the impact? If you can't prove the impact or talk about what the impact could be, you're not going to get very far. Because the people that hold the purse strings want to know what the impact is. So we started testing prototypes. We partnered with a vendor called Roundtable Learning. They're out there in the expo hall, I think at the Pico booth. They're fantastic to work with as well. So this is our first simulated experience. This is a very scaled down experience as our first prototype. So this is very scripted, very specific in the order of steps that you have to take. So you can see different things are highlighted. You have to click on them to remove them. This is all about changing a specific valve. But this is our first attempt. So what we did is we ran technicians through our virtual class, and then we asked them to complete this simulation so that they could practice the task of changing this specific valve. The feedback that we got on this was that it was interesting, it was cool, it was something they hadn't seen before, but from an adoption standpoint, we had about 80 people go through the class and about 4 people adopt the simulation. Not great, not great, but it was an attempt, right? So it kind of helps us understand what works, what doesn't, what do technicians like to see. We could get some feedback from that and kind of understand where we need to go next. So what we did was we went with round 2. So now we started building more animated stuff. This is less focused on the actual simulation, but using 3D models, nice renderings, we can really focus on how different things flow through the dispenser, which components are involved in each process, and technicians can understand how the actual inside of the machine works when a drink is flowing. So we walk through that process, and our instructor kind of walks through the steps as they're shown on the screen. So next, once we kind of did some prototypes, did some testing, we researched the market. The best way to do that is to visit conferences like this one. We actually went to AES last year and met a company called Campfire 3D, also in the expo hall, also very cool to work with. So we connected with professionals on LinkedIn. We did some exploration on YouTube to understand what other people are doing in the same space, seeing how they're using different technologies, how they're applying the concepts. But it's also nice to be able to just put a headset on and try and experience it for yourself so you understand what the user is going to go through. But when you do all these things, there's one question you need to ask yourself. It's the same question that your executives are going to ask you. What's the impact? It's very important to understand the impact going forward. Again, like I said, the theme that's kind of been present throughout all of today's sessions, make sure IT is involved. Introducing technology requires the right approvals, requires the right processes. A standard corporate device is not going to cut XR development. A lot of system requirements are responsible here. You need to make sure you discuss those with your IT team, get their buy-in, help them understand what you're trying to accomplish, and they may have suggestions. They might surprise you and say, we want to try that too. Maybe you should look at these softwares or something like that. You know, it's interesting to see how the partnerships can come together, but the more partnerships you make with key stakeholders, your counterparts in IT, it helps make navigating those non-standard requests a little bit easier. Also, for us, since we designed and developed the freestyle units, which is the one you see here on the screen, we have CAD files internally that we could use to help kind of expedite our process. For some of our other manufacturers, getting those CAD files are a little bit difficult. It's intellectual property, don't always want to share, even though we're playing in the same sandbox. they come with a varying degree of complexity. So as you can see here, we've got some errant screws in the back. There's a tube coming out of the front. There's a little panel that's a little misaligned. Because you think about engineering, they're not designing with training in mind. They're designing with production in mind. So when you start working with your engineering counterparts, you need to look at how can we discuss what we're trying to accomplish, and then what level of workload are they going to put on themselves to help you accomplish your own goals. So it's kind of a give and take, and we went back and forth on some of these models to help them kind of group parts to make it a little bit easier for us to use, and then we took on some of the workload to help make it easier on them. And that's where it comes to upskilling your team members. So I've got two team members here as well, Ro and Bo over here. If you have questions about any of the stuff that is on the screen, it's them, it's not me. I lead the team, they do the work, it's great. But what's nice to know is that we have the backing from our leadership, we have the investment to help them upskill along the way. Looking at boot camps, looking at online resources, looking at certificate programs. And fortunately for us, Campfire was nice enough to help kind of lead that effort too. So they built some stuff for us, taught us some skills along the way, and was fantastic to work with. So this animation that we have built here that showcases how the inside of a soda valve works. It's a nice example of where we are at this point. So the results to date, how is it working? You know, it's working really good. It's great. So what we lack is actual performance data, which is what we're getting to in our simulated side. So once we start tracking scores on speed, accuracy, financial responsibility, that'll be much more impactful data. For now, what we can say is that in our overall NPS score, for the experiences that do offer those virtual reality and 3D model experiences, the learners that go through those classes have a +9 on our NPS score. So they're much more enjoyable, much more satisfied with those experiences. Similarly, the effectiveness of that experience on a self-reported scale is a +8 score. These are pretty good numbers. The big one for me, though, one of the questions that we ask on our survey is how relevant is the content, how quickly can you apply the content that you learned, and did the experience help you grasp the concept? And we group all this together in a perceived learning impact score, which we're seeing at a +4 for those virtual experiences. So what all this tells me is that people enjoy it, they like it, it's helpful. So without the actual performance data to back it up, I can rely on this and say, we're headed in the right direction. We may not be there yet, but we're working to get to the right place. So for us, our next steps, like I said, is looking at those live virtual hands-on workshops, having the students join an instructor via headset, multiple dispensers, everybody gets their own to work on. Scoring the simulations is going to be vital for us to look at actual performance data. So we can say that based on the performance in the simulations, people can do tasks faster, better, and do it in a way that saves the company money. Bringing those two pieces together, it's going to help us proactively reinforce or target customers or service providers that need help repairing specific equipment platforms. So looking at data, we can say this group of individuals is struggling on a specific platform. So we can reach out to those service providers and say, hey, we see that your techs are struggling. Instead of having them go on calls and practice in the field, let's practice in a safe space, let's offer you some virtual classes, and let's get you upskilled on this technology so that your technicians are more proficient in the field. So once we get to our measurement side, that's going to be a big game changer for us. We're going to make sure that we are much more proactive, much more impactful as a partner, but all of that's still to come. We're still very young in our journey, and we're getting there, just like I'm sure everyone in this room is getting there. Questions?
I'll come to you second. This gentleman put his hand up last time.
It's quite all right. Scott Grimes with Donaldson Company. This immersive training, do you have any data on employee retention? Because you're engaging them in this immersive technology, there's a psychological benefit to it that makes them feel part of the plan. So any data that you could share on your ability to retain the skill?
So that would go back into the, once we get into the scored simulation piece. Right now, we don't have an easy way to, since our service technicians are not Coca-Cola employees, they're all third party, we don't have a unique like employee ID that we can track. So we can't say that you went through this class on this date and now you're performing this well in the field. So we don't have that data yet, but once we start looking at their track record going through these virtual simulations, we can start tying their LMS performance and then look by service provider group in the field to track some of that performance, but not specifically, no.
Hi, I'm Chip Flory from Boeing. Great presentation, very smooth. I really liked how you did that. I'm curious, and maybe it might be too early in the process to answer, that's okay. But I'm curious about the instructor managing multiple users or trainees and multiple headsets. What sort of tools are you developing or are being developed in order to support that? I find that when I've been in those sort of situations, I might have some ace students that are swimming through trainings, but I might have someone that's lagging behind. How do you support that without completely losing the momentum of your training?
So I think the way that we'd approach that is similarly to an in-person class. If you'd imagine the in-person class happening in a virtual space, the technicians that are in the class will have the ability to say, hey, I need some help over here. So the instructor can walk over to this virtual dispenser. They'll be in the same space and can kind of focus on, okay, what's the problem? How can I help you? So it'll still be that one-on-one instruction, but more in a group space. And also with the virtual space, the technicians will have an opportunity to kind of learn from each other as well. So the goal is we want to create the in-person session, but in a virtual space.
More questions? I can just yell real loud. No, don't worry, because I'll run, be my exercise for the day.
All right, so thanks. Saini Alafrit, CNS. So I'm wondering, for these virtual learning efforts, how strongly were they integrated with your existing, learning departments and LMS systems and existing learning infrastructure versus kind of being on their own and experimental and freedom? And how do you see that going forward for your organization in the future?
So the department that I work in is essentially a self-serving L&D department. So we have instructional designers, we have multimedia specialists, and we have trainers that focus solely on our service network. So the work that we do is kind of independent from like a global L&D department. So we have kind of a little bit more free reign to do what we need to do to focus on delivering education to our technicians. Going forward, I don't see that changing, so we'll continue to have a little bit more freedom, a little bit more investment that's separate from our global learning department. So it allows us a little bit more flexibility. Mm-hmm.
You're trying to time me out, you lot.
What's the demographic of the technicians you had going through this? I mean, were they all experienced, relatively new? Well, who is taking this training? Someone who's already had some traditional style training too? Mix that up?
So it was a variation. So we open our classes up to any technician that wants to register. Excuse me. So in that demographic area, we've got new technicians straight out of college, and we also have very seasoned technicians that are closer to retirement. We tend to have a little bit of a lull. I would say it's more of like a horseshoe shape to say. We've got more new technicians coming in. There's less of the middle of the road and more of those that are towards the retirement side. So it is interesting to see kind of the shift in demographics and the comfortability with technology. I would say that we do have some hesitancy around those that have been in the field for so long, getting traditional training, getting more used to putting hands on dispensers and things like that. So that's part of a change management effort that we're focused on.
Last one, okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. Ivo from KLM Royal Dutch Airlines at Amsterdam Airport. I was wondering, do you still do the training in a physical room, or are you thinking about doing it remotely because you have people all over the country, all over the US. So you could save on efficiency by actually doing it completely virtual. Is that an option, or would that be too sophisticated?
I think we do have the option to do that. We have a pretty heavily invested studio in our Atlanta office, and it gives us, it's more of a wide open space. Like if you think about instructors maybe doing this from their homes, they may not have the technological infrastructure to support that type of environment. But from the learner's perspective, yes, they can probably join from wherever, whether PC-based or headset-based. They should be able to join from wherever.
Perfect. Michael, thank you very much indeed.
Thank
That was
you.
awesome. Thanks,
Thank
Matt. Thank you very much, Matt. Okay, now this is very exciting. Definitely.